$0 to $1 million in revenue,
wow. Okay.
5 years. But then from 1 to 40 where we sold, 4 years. You've been chasing that dollar figure, you get it and you go, life's still the same. I see myself and you, we work. And the year he retired was the year he was on his deathbed. It's not worth it.
What have you learned on that process?
What I found out is I have these skills and ability to create financial means. And one day I go like, yeah, I'm on the rich list, but like, why? If I can do something that's beyond myself, I can have that purpose, but it's something a little bit more fulfilling.
How would you define yourself as a leader?
How do I work with them to get the best I can from them, which serves the ultimate goal of the business, but also serves them as an individual?
Was that something that you guys actually believed was going to happen?
For the first 7 years, we were on a salary of 50 grand. Why? Because we saw in year 10, there'll be something huge. And so we will spend accordingly for that.
Did you like maintain a really good relationship with both your brothers?
Most of the time.
What would you do differently?
And so what I challenged myself with was...
Dude, is that a watch on your wrist?
It's a Whoop band.
Okay.
It's a status symbol to show I care about my health. No, jokes.
Does it work?
Yeah. It tracks my sleep and training. I have, you get the nice watch and then you realize, yeah, but I'm not going to have my data.
And it's more important, the data.
The data is more important. I like to wake up and go like, how am I feeling today?
How's your sleep?
Fantastic. Mine cut off last night because I ran out of battery, but I track it like religiously. It's the best.
Nice.
It's interesting. I make that joke. It's a status symbol, but it is quite interesting because once you're kind of like in their, in their world, you then see someone else. You're like, I know.
What do you call it? Like, are they whoopers? Like,
No, I don't know. They are to me. So like Grant's as an example, he had like a Rolex on one hand and a Whoop on the other hand, and I was like, nice.
You're living in style.
You're living in style and you're tracking your data. I like it.
I was doing some research on you, and I think what stood out for me the most, I think it was a Forbes article. There was this concept, I don't know, you defined it, it was purpose realignment. And I want you to talk to it, but I guess what stood out for me was like most founders that I see that do really well, that exit, go and start a new biz pretty quick, or they're like in research mode for the next biz. But like you took a different path. And I was really inspired by that. So I just wanted to, I guess, open that up and just hear from you like how that came about.
Love that. Okay, so it came about like this. I love content and like learning. One, because I want to better my skills, but two, just because I love it. Like I love hearing the stories and stuff like that. And as it came time to kind of go through that process of the exit, I wanted to figure out what does it look like on the other side? Like, I didn't want it all happen. And then I go, I have to learn this. I kind of go like, who else has done it? And what can I learn from it so I can be prepared? And the biggest thing I learned was it's going to be anticlimactic. The big number, the thing you've been racing for every single day for us was 10 years. You're going to be like, what next? Because it's, talking about dopamine again, it's like your brain is just like dopamine spike, reset, baseline. What next? You've killed and hunted the deer. You're hungry tomorrow. Let's go again, right?
I love it.
And so I figured that out. And the next was like the entrepreneurial spirit is like having that skin in the game and having that purpose every single day is the thing probably more so than the money that drives you. And so I realized very quickly that I'm going to need to be able to go, okay, I've sold this. I'm still the CEO of this company, but what's the thing that gets me out of bed? And so the different data points that I'd kind of heard of and learned from, one was a guy called David Shane. So Davidson sold his business for $1 billion in year 2000. Anybody hears that like, oh my God, he must just be the happiest guy ever, right? And he went through the deepest depression of his life the year later because he lost his purpose. And someone had kind of helped him through that and said, Dave, life is very simple. We need someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. And he'd lost his something to do and something to look forward to. And so he's like, what is life, right? And also because you've been chasing that dollar figure, you get it and you go, life's still the same, right? Like, yeah, I got the cooler car. For him, it's just a Subaru because he just thinks it's reliable. But it's like, what is it all worth? What is it all for? So then fast forwarding, I was with my wife. And the next data point I had was it was a good friend of mine who's in business who'd been, he's grinding, he's incredible at business. And he had an uncle or a family member say to him, like on his deathbed at age 60, I see myself and you, we work. And one day, we put aside and go, okay, one day when we retire, we'll think about the family and we'll kind of take time. Yeah. And he had that plan all the way up until he was 60. And the year he retired was the year he was on his deathbed. And he goes, it's not worth it. And so these two big data points and then all that learning, I went, okay, I need to figure out what it is. And so what I challenged myself with was, okay, I have these skills and ability to create financial means, but do I want to just go next? And one day I go like, yeah, I'm on the rich list and yeah, I've got a yacht, but like, why? But I want to use those skills. And so that was the purpose realignment. I realized, okay, if I can do something that's beyond myself, which is the cookbook, which is raising $1 million for children's cancer, I can have that purpose, but it's something a little bit more fulfilling. Last caveat though. I'm going to go again. I'm going to go again, right? It was just a breathing moment. And I think it was a lot to do with like, I want to soak in, this is the thing I've been running towards, let it sit, get it, be happy, blah, 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 blah. But I'll go again because I love it. I love the game.
How has that time been, like spending with your partner? I mean, you got a little boy.
I got a little boy, Oscar. Shout outs, 2 years old.
Shout outs to Oscar. But how's that been? Like, so the time that now you have with them, like being focused, being present, has that been like profound?
It's the best. Like it's the best. It's the freedom and flexibility. Now I still like work air quotes a lot contextually to my life. So like probably 40 hours a week. So it's probably not a lot for a lot of people, but anyway. But I do the things I want to do. So I consider like going to have lunch with someone who, is a great person I jam with, but also, there's leverage and network. I consider that work because it's like it's building my network over time, but it's not a hard thing to do. But it also means that, Monday, Tuesdays, my wife has decided to go back to work. She's a clinical psychologist. She's done that purely for the sake of like love of being able to, help other people. But it means I pick up my son from daycare and on Tuesdays I look after him every second Tuesday. And so I'm like at Bounced, he's bouncing on a trampoline. There's a couple of other mums there with the kids and I'm like, man, this is cool.
I love that.
I'm like, this is so cool. And like, I'm not getting, like my phone isn't blowing up. I'm not getting distracted by things. I can like be there and like bounce on a trampoline with him like I'm a kid and he's just frothing.
That's so good.
And I'm like, this is it. Like, it's sick.
Good on you, man. Like that really inspired me. Hey, like I don't see many founders who have the discipline or even go through that thought process to look at those two data points. Obviously with David, it seems like, is he a bit of a mentor to you?
I would say so. Yeah. It's only in the recent years, but he's super wise and he's been through those journeys. And so when you hear someone like that and you the number a billion, you're like, okay, if you're there, then you also know like from X million to a billion, there ain't no difference. And I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna trust so I don't have to go through that. I don't have to be depressed because I'm like, what was it all for?
That's awesome. You mentioned going again. I want to talk about that. Knowing what you know now, being a founder, being a father, being a leader, starting a business again from scratch, what would you do differently?
How long do we have?
6 hours.
6 hours, yeah. I saw a Lex Friedman podcast yesterday and at the title it said Elon Musk and it was 8.5 hours and I was like, okay. I was like, we are leveling up our game. I'm ready. It was a cheat though. Elon was only on for an hour 15, then someone else came on. So it's like a podcast marathon. Anyway, what would I do differently? So much. So like, let me give the context. We were bootstrapped, so never raised capital, which meant we were kind of limited in our growth trajectory. I had no network, zero network. My closest network was, 2 other apprentice chefs, which I worked with, which were great guys, right? But that's it. I had limited to no skills and knowledge, and I was figuring it out along the way. Okay, so those are probably the big things, and no research. I did none research. So here's what I'm doing differently this time as I kind of go down the pathway of like the research phase. Is I now, I come up with something and go, cool, that's where I want to play in. Before, it was like, here's the first opportunity on the table, and we just went, let's go. Now, it panned out great. Awesome. Awesome. But there is 14,000 parallel universes where it didn't pan out great. So kind of lucky. Now I'm going, okay, I have the ability to make, the last one I probably spent in a week, 40 hours of meetings from like, kind of mentory style, high net worth individuals. Here's what I'm thinking. Tell me why I'm dumb. To people who are in the industry. Okay, you've built the business I want to build. What does it look like now? To people who are in the industry doing on the tools, doing the day-to-day, and kind of take those to different data points. Now, I'm conscious not to have one person just change your thinking, but you also want to go like everything when you look at it from the outset, the Hormozy girl in the red dress concept is like, from the outset, it's like, oh my God, like, oh, how sexy. Like, how good is that? And you don't know the deep context, which is like the reality of the day to day. I want to find out from someone, what does the reality look like before I start? So the research bit is probably really key for me, is like now trying to uncover what I can, having that network. The next element is around time. If I look at our journey, it was 0 to 12 years from 10 years to sale, then took me 2 years to kind of unwind as CEO, and ultimately only 2 weeks ago finished up. It's a reasonable time horizon. My next thing is like, okay, how do I do that in half the time? So it's going, I don't actually want to start a business from scratch. So so now knowing my skill set, so now we get to skill set, is like, the value I create is not when we're sitting in front of a computer and we go, okay, what's our logo and name? That's not that's not my value of time, and that's not where I create leverage. My leverage comes from, where I might go and acquire a business, or I might buy into as a significant portion of another business where they've kind of, maybe missed the opportunity to scale, and they don't know, how to kind of take it to the next step. Because I want to not go from that 0 to 1 million revenue. Last time it took us 5 years to get to $0 to $1 million in revenue.
Wow. Okay.
5 years. But then from 1 to 40, where we sold, 4 years. Okay. Right. So I want to go from, okay, skip the first 5 years and go, okay, boom, how do we go the 4 years again up? Lastly, is for me, it's about what would I do differently, is also about not necessarily like doubling down, like I've been talking about on strengths, but it's also like, what am I doing it for? So if it's purely, you said to me, okay, here's the exact same thing, you can go again and you can make another X number of million. I'm like, cool, but is that enough? And so for me, like, what is enough is like, it's also about the learning that you get from it. So the other day I did this, like an end post to being at Domain and Realbase. And it was like this real cool moment of reflection. I sat down. I've never spent so much time running a bloody post on Instagram. But I thought about it. I really thought about it. And I was like, man, like the person I was when I entered to the person I am today is fundamentally a different person. The reason that, like...
In what way?
So many ways. So, okay, let's go there. So like I was 20 years old. I think the chef world, I had a certain level of arrogance in terms of like, I just thought I was the best chef before I really was. And so I had like, I probably had more ego at 20 than I do now, by like a magnitude of 10 folds. Right. And so like that, I didn't have any skills. I didn't have like the ability, like personality, like personable skills. There were so many of those like skills that were missing. And then also like, your over time, like your gut and intuition builds through the data points you create. And I think there was just like, I was just a much shallower person, not in terms of shallow, in terms of shiny objects, but just like there wasn't as much depth to me because I was young and fresh. And I left with so many different skills, like knowing myself, going through the hardest times that I've ever gone through. It's those things that make you. And the reason that like 85% of lottery winners lose their money in the first 5 years, because they haven't built the skills necessary to know how to handle that kind of cash. And so now going into the next thing is like, what are the next skills I want to stack on there? And so the things for me is like, oh, like, is there an international piece there that I'm not, I haven't played in that realm? Is it, we've gotten to 40 million revenue. What does it look like to play in the 100 million? We built a business that was quite people heavy. We have 400 people to service 40 million. Like, what does it look like to have a super team of 50 to do 100 million revenue? So it's those different things to again go like, okay, how can I walk into this next one and then come back in 5 years and go, oh, how cute. When I was with Ben, I thought I was a different person. Now look at me. Like, I love that. So it's those layers. That's what I'm thinking about differently.
Talking about leverage and skills, you mentioned both that. And then talking about, obviously, I remember when I met you at Bathurst Pavilion, I was like, Jack,
where I worked as a chef.
Where's Franco? And he's like, he's a chef. I was like, what? And you obviously, you mentioned arrogant there.
Yeah.
Did you bring that arrogance and ego into Real Hub? And then I guess another question is like, what were your skills Like when you got, like, you know what I mean? Like, what were those skills?
Yeah, good. Okay, so it's really interesting that like the time horizon as I reflect on the arrogance, I was really arrogant at my skills at age like 15. So here's a story I've never shared before publicly, probably for good reason. I'd spent 4 weeks in Italy and went at age 16 or 17 to work in some restaurants because I knew I wanted to be a chef. So I was like, how can I up my skills before I start my chefing career? So that was during my time at school. I get back and I'm working at my cafe where I was a chef on a Saturday, and someone sends back their pasta. And the manager, owner of the business goes, Frank, this is undercooked. And I go, oh, so they want overcooked pasta then? And then flick it. And then he just looks at me like, you little fuck. You know, like who do you think you're talking to? And that's because that's where I just thought I was the best. You know what I mean? And so I think going to Bathers, that actually got knocked back a few pegs. The arrogance and ego was fully in relation to my cooking. Like I thought I was just the best and on the pathway to become the best chef in the world. Even though now I look back, I'm like, compared to what I did in business, which was like stay curious, learn as much as I could, you know, try and learn from the best, not have the loudest voice and just soak in. I did none of that in the kitchen. You know, I did like, you know, there was chefs there that had all the cookbooks and like learned from the people and like talked about people's names. And I'm like, nah, like, like I did nothing that actually put myself in the place to be the best. And then we go, what were the skills when I started? Honestly, the thing I had more than anything was the willingness to do the work. So the chef days were 60 hours a week. I used to do 3 doubles, which is a 16-hour day. I lived in close to Palm Beach, Avalon, and I worked in Mossman. So I would leave for home at 10 p.m., get into bed 11:30. I would wake up at 5:30 and go back to work. Your life is work.
Insane.
And like the culture in the kitchen back then was, you know, you had a 2-hour break on the books, right? You're a loser if you take it.
Wow.
You know, like it was very much like, oh, like having a Christmas holiday, champ, you know, like, and so that was the culture. Like you poke fun at someone if they're going to take a break. So you didn't take a break. And so I think that is probably the primary thing that came into when we did the business. Is I didn't have any of those skills. But I had kind of mentally what it took to do the thing, you know. So we were living in a 3-bedroom house. We didn't have a couch. We had bean bags. We didn't have a TV. We had computer screens. The weekends was building signboards. The week was doing the work, and all we did was train, work, go to sleep, and on Sunday, you know, eat a bag of M&Ms because it was a treat. Like, and I think I'm really lucky as I did that with my brother Ken, who helped me knock back the ego, because it would be, you know, the end of one of these weeks, 4 months in, and I'm like, finally get to, you know, do some mindless scrolling or something. And Ken looks at me, he's like, what are you doing with your life? Like, why aren't you learning something? And I was like, I've been working so hard. You know, we're working 70 hours this week. He's like, you're a loser. Like, and like at the time I was so offended, but now I'm like, man, it's so true. And I think that's probably what started the pathway, which is like, got to soak in, got to learn.
So it's interesting, like how the dots connect, like that grit, like obviously from the kitchen days is obviously like what propelled you to execute so hard, right? In terms of your role.
100%.
It's amazing. And so you got 2 brothers, right? So
two brothers.
Ken, Jacques?
Ken and Jacques, yeah.
So were they both doing like software in the?
So Ken, super genius, taught himself how to become a software engineer at 15.
Okay.
Jacques, the skill set he had was do whatever it takes, whatever is required, whatever the business requires, and make himself redundant. That was his lingo. Was my role is to make myself redundant.
Smart.
So it was like I'm you know, this task which is building these templates at monotony. I'm going to do that till I master it, and then I'm going to do the training manual and train the people till I never touch it again. And so at the end, he realized, well, the last skill set I have to conquer is becoming a software engineer. And so for the last 4-ish years, that's what he did.
And you nailed that?
Oh, he nailed it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. My brothers are very, 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 very intelligent, and I'm lucky for that.
Did you, throughout that whole, I guess, you know, that 10 years or however long it was, obviously real hub, then real base, did you like maintain a really good relationship with both your brothers?
Most of the time.
That's impressive.
I have a big smile because there was definitely times where things became really tense, and the part that's the challenge is you enter into it with brotherly context. You know, so when I started, I was 20 years old. So there isn't, although we're equal partners, you're not equal people. You're older brother, younger brother. And so we had to go through tough times and challenges, but we came out like closer than ever. On the way here, I was on the phone to my brother Jacques. Last night I'm on the phone to my brother Ken. Like we're just jamming.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So
it's
I'm
so cool.
super stoked about that.
Because you see it go the other way.
Oh yeah.
A lot. Yeah. That's really fascinating. So I want to talk about the sale, right? So actually I'll step back a bit. When you were grinding throughout that time, right? You guys were just on salaries, yeah?
Yeah.
Salaries. Because I also read there was a broker that did a cold outreach to you on the LinkedIn, which I want to talk about. But did you guys think you're going to be selling for a big price? Was that something that you guys actually believe was going to happen?
The number we landed on, probably not. The big price, yes. So we were quite delusional in our thinking, if you will, in those early years, because my brother Jacques, which I've shared a few times, is my brother Jacques and I would be installing a signboard at 5 a.m. in Manly, and we'd be talking about one day when this business is worth 50 mil, and we'd have absolute conviction in that conversation. There wasn't a question about it. And I had this moment the other day where I saw, so embarrassingly, a Facebook post. You remember Facebook where it's like you did it on people's walls and then everybody saw it, and it's like you're having weird lame conversations to each other. It was me to my brother, and I was like, one day we'll own this, which is just so awkward. But anyway, it's like a $45 million penthouse in Sydney, and that was in year one of our business when we were doing $5,000, $5,000 a month. And so we thought like that, so we knew it was going to be something big, but I couldn't tell you that we had a business plan that we reverse engineered to get us there. We just thought big.
Yeah, as founders do.
Yeah.
The conviction.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting. So let's talk about this cold outreach. So someone just hits you up like a broker.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. So what happened was right place, right time. And so I'm always conscious with the podcast is people are listening. Yes, cool. Good to hear from Frank and his story. But it's what do I get from it? And so here's the thing you get for this particular thing. The cold outreach, 99% of the time is going to be, it's the wrong place, wrong person, wrong time, and it's going to mean nothing to them. It'll not get opened, boo-hoo, move on with life. But sometimes you're going to land it and it's going to be the perfect time, the perfect moment, the perfect person, as long as you've articulated it and pointed it directly to them. So I was in this process where I was trying to personally sell the business because, I was good at sales and I thought that just translated to selling your own business. And I was unsuccessful because I didn't know the structure, the process, the way in which you follow when it comes to business sale. It is very different. And then I get a LinkedIn message which said, hey, Frank, congrats on Realbase. Your business is worth 180 million. I believe the buyer for you is going to be domain.com.au. And I want to talk you through the strategy of how I think I could get that for you.
Solid. That's solid copy.
And I'm like, sure, why not? You know what I mean? And weirdly enough, they were the buyer. That was the number, you know what I mean? And I everything was geared towards that. And at the time I was like, you're dreaming. But worst case scenario, it's a conversation.
When you first read it, what did you feel? Do you think this is bullshit? Did you have conviction it was going to happen?
I had none conviction, right? I thought it was bullshit, but I was like, okay, he knows the business, he knows the market, he knows potential buyers, because I'd already been talking to these buyers. So and that's why I thought it was bullshit, because I was kind of I said to him, I go, I've spoken to Domain, they're not the buyer. And he's like, with respect, you don't know their strategy, so you've been selling your key benefits. We need to sell how your business works in their strategy. And I was like, okay, well, let's give it a go.
What was the first meeting like with?
With him?
Or with Domain?
Oh, with Domain. Let me remember that. It was a bit of a whirlwind, right? So sometimes when people read the articles, read the headlines, and only recently someone approached me doing an article what was it like when they came with you the check? It's not how it worked. It was a competitive process. So we had 10 different parties enter this process. So my role, I was CEO, I had the CFO, and I had a previous CEO to the merged company with me. So we made a little team of 3. My role, I was the guy who was pitching. CFO was the financial, and the other guy was kind of essentially spitballing with me to get us to the right place. So you're doing this pitch for their strategy 10 times, but then now you've the first level, the next one's with the CEO. So I would have done that pitch 50 times.
Wow.
But not to mention the times that we practice. So like me and a guy called Tim Dean, huge shout outs, absolute legend. He was like, he was in my corner. He was the guy the best way to describe it is like from Rocky when they're like drinking eggs and shadow boxing and going for a run. So we would go for a 20K run, and what he would do is I would memorize the slide deck page for page and the pitch so I could do it really organically, and we would do it over a run. So he would be going, say, I would do that. You go, say again. I'd do that. And so we're running.
So good.
Running and jamming this session. And then he's throwing in questions like what the buyer's going to ask me and stuff like that. So you've done it so many times. I can't actually remember the first meeting, but I just remember like the process and how many of those meetings come through is intense.
Preparation over running. I love that. You said earlier you're good at sales. Where'd you pick that up? Because obviously in the kitchen you're not selling,
No.
You're cooking,
Yeah.
and you're telling customers to get fucked.
Yeah.
and then
Literally.
you started obviously then Real Hub.
Yep.
Did you just start to realize, hey, I've got a talent, like I can sell?
No, it all kind of happened based on my two brothers. Like I said, hyper intelligent, but it was clearly obvious that their skill sets were not going to be external people. It was where they got the most leverage is going to be software engineering and operations. And so by a game of 3, well, someone's got to sell the business.
Yeah,
That's you, Frank. So like I had no idea what I was doing, and I just had to learn quickly. So I bought an online course, Grant Cardone, $2,000 sales university.
Love that.
It was just like, I mean, like you look at the content, it's absolutely dog shit, but what it was incredibly powerful. And so I just kind of, amalgamated all of these different books, content, people, way in which they script and dialogue, brought it into my world, and then kind of went like, what feels natural, what feels like it works, and then over time just kind of honed my craft. So the sales piece definitely wasn't natural. I think I'm like naturally an extrovert, but I'm like not naturally a salesperson, and so I had to kind of sharpen that through time and a lot of process to reflect. So what I would do is like I would record my calls, not really based on anybody telling me, but it just felt natural to me to do so. Record my calls, listen back, and then like I love the psychology of selling. So like my favorite book was Influenced by Robert Giardini. And it was understanding, when I listened to it, it was less about the words, but around what was the inflection of their voice doing? What was the tonality happening, so that I knew what was working, what wasn't working. So I called those like my aha moments, and I would have like a toolkit of aha moments. And so like I would go like, how do I refine let's say my pitch presentation from an hour, because no one fucking listens to an hour, to go like, how do I make it 15 minutes of aha moments, and then like just drop these bombs and have this toolkit, based on these psychological principles. So it was really through kind of practice and repetition to get there.
Have you always been someone you seem like fanatically obsessed with optimization? I don't know, like have you always, and you're smiling,
I'm smiling because I had this last week where someone had said like, you seem like rigor and calm and all these things, and I'm like, man, I'm doing a great job on social media to present myself in a way. It's like yes and no, like, so when I think about that, like the optimization, I'm imagining like a spreadsheet and then Elon Musk and, I'm not, but I think about continual progress, and it's almost like from a lazy factor. It's like, what is the path of least resistance to get the outcome I want? Well, I can do an hour, but that's going to take an hour. I could do it in 30 minutes, but I could do it way better, and then get to that outcome. Like people cold calling as an example, and it's around numbers. Like I did 100 calls today. My maximum cold calls in a single day was about 10. I hated it. And so for me, it was about leverage. So it's like, I'd rather have a conversation with someone that can be, a $500,000 to $1 million a year client. And I'd rather disproportionately spend time on them and understand their business than I would having 50 random phone calls.
Makes sense.
So it's probably less around fanatical optimization and probably more around how do I just do it better and compress the time horizon so I can do something else.
I love that. How would you define yourself? I mean, you had 400 staff, right?
Yeah.
How would you define yourself like as a leader?
Okay, I think it stems contextually from my upbringing. Everybody's like, oh God, here we go. He's gonna go on a 40-minute tangent. I promise I won't. I was the youngest of 3 brothers. And I think what that meant is I was highly empathetic because I was like young and sweet little boy. And I got to see the years ahead, which was like the teenage years and like the little rebellious years. Not rebellious as in doing bad things, but like example, like my brother would be like, oh, mum and dad, I hate you, because he didn't get something.
Yeah.
And I would run up to mum and dad and I'd be crying. I'm like, he doesn't hate you. He just really wants that thing, you know? Like, so for me, like I was just this like empathetic being, and I always played this role, which is like a mediator almost. And so why that's relevant to leadership is I always think, sometimes to my own detriment, about how even a sentence is going to feel from someone else's words, like from someone else's mind. So you know, I never use the horn in my car, because I'm like, what if I beep, they've had a terrible day and they jump off a cliff? I know that's so dramatic, but like it's just how my brain is wired. So from like a leadership perspective, I always think about, and I don't, it doesn't hold me back in terms of I'm never going to fire someone, because no, I don't want to break their heart. But it's like, I'm like, how do I work with them to get the best I can from them, which serves the ultimate goal of the business, but also serves them as an individual. And I think that like level of empathy and understanding from all these different shoes, from a leadership perspective, what it helps you to do is understand that, just like in sales, you can't have just one approach to get the deal across the line. You've got different types of people. You don't want to be inauthentic, but you want to be malleable to understand their position. And that's how I was as a leader. Some people were not wired to care about dollars and cents, and so I have to figure out what motivates them. And some people are. And then the last layer from there is like, I think recently I figured out, you know, I think about things as like your unfair advantage or your superpower. And I realized my superpower is probably not working with the 400 people, but it's working with a smaller cohort of like your weapons, and those people, your high performance, and disproportionately spending time to them to like inspire them to increase their skills and capabilities, and like to make them realize maybe what they don't see in themselves. And so like today I do that with founders and things like that, where I you know, can go there, distill the information on their business, and then, you know, have certain little unlocks really quickly that even for a founder, you know, I left a meeting last week and the 3 founders like, man, why am I re-inspired for my own business? Like, and I'm like, good. Huge, you know? So like that's my leadership thing is I probably, if you looked at my role as a CEO compared to another, you'd be like, this is completely different. This is not usual, because I don't know what usual looked like. This just felt natural to me. Is like, a business is really simple. If you can attract and hire the best talent, if you can keep them and push their skills up, that's it. Right? And put them in the right roles.
Role of the CEO.
That's it. Like there's nothing else to it, because like every problem can be solved with the right individual who's empowered in the right spot. And so like that was my focus. It was like always like how to push skills and capabilities up across the board.
I love that. In regards to attracting talent.
Yes.
How did you like kick off? Were you pretty good in that department? Like in terms of recognizing you know, people always put on a show when they're sitting in front of you. Yeah. And so were you pretty good at like identifying like who's good, who's not, and hiring good people?
Yes and no. So again, because we were having to learn through the process. You know, if I look at years 1 to 4, we didn't hire that many people, but we had a lot of not so great ones. Towards the end, more so. I think I was just conscious of this. Like, often the person across the table from you is going to be giving you the answers you want to hear. Sometimes you can pick up on that. Sometimes you can feel it's disingenuous. And sometimes you can't. And so the reality is like, I'm never going to know this person that well in this time. So what I'll do is I'm going to hire them, but I'm going to make the decision to move them on really quickly, because like only through actually bringing them in here am I going to see the true version of them. And like, if they're good, they're going to be able to sell to me. And like, I'm only going to know when they're in that seat. You know, there's people that are like, you know, hire slow and fire fast. That's great. I think sometimes in business, when things are going, and it's annoying, when things are going really fast, it's really hard to go, I'm going to hire slow. Because like, no, I just need the person in the seat. Yeah. You know, it wasn't uncommon that we would have 25 open roles. It wasn't uncommon that in a week I would do 10 to 15 interviews. And that was still when I was a CEO. Like, so I still saw that as my most important role. So yeah, I could do 14 different interviews per person and psychoanalysis and blah, 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 blah. But I'm going to get it wrong still. And so like, let's just figure it out really quickly and then like move it on. And I get more, like, I don't get attached so much to the person. I'm like, oh, we're going to make it work. It's like, okay, the team will help us self-select them out, or it'll be really quick and obvious that we can move on.
I love that. What was the transition like for you, moving from obviously this baby, this company that you founded with your brothers, and then you merged with someone else with another. What was it like then moving into a public company like Domain under all the political all the ladders you got to climb? Like how was that environment for you? Like to then be operating?
Oh, interesting.
Who's listening?
No. So I only laugh because I go like it is so fundamentally different. I don't think there's a right way and a wrong way, but there's a thing which is the same as like find the right people and put them in the right place. You can clearly see that people could be amazing, but they won't thrive in the right place. Yeah. For me, that was the corporate world. I can work in it, but it's not in my DNA. So for example, we loved making decisions at pace really, really quickly and then be able to move on, pivot from those or double down. But like our time between decide and sunning and execute, sometimes as hours, sometimes days, sometimes as weeks, to move from that to a corporate environment where there's just more people. And so the execution phase is like a coercing the people who are going to sign the business plan. And you're like, okay, I've had this idea and it's taken 18 months to execute. I'm like, I don't understand. Like we could have had 10 iterations of the idea. And I get it because you've got so many people and if you just do everything, it could be a failure. But like when you kind of know deep down inside and you've been doing this thing for so long, you do build a lot of knowledge. And so you do build a reasonable confidence in your abilities to execute. So when you have that particular idea, you're like, no, I'm like, there's an 85% chance it's going to work. So going through the process of having, wasn't uncommon, 23 meetings to finally get to the answer, which the answer is no, you're like, okay, and so that I think that environment, for me, that's not my environment. And I think that's cool. Like it taught me a lot. Like I think previously in the past, I had like a fascination with like, I want to take a company to IPO. I might do that, but I probably don't want to be the CEO to an IPO company for 5 to 10 years. I don't want to, sit there or the game of influence, and the more people you have in business, what I realized is the less people are willing to put their neck out. So what I love doing is surrounding myself with no people and people that tell me I'm shit. So everybody, anybody who's listening, they'll know who they are. The kind of people where I go like, doesn't matter my role, my title, what I've done, what I sold the business for. I go, here's an idea, and they go, that's fucking terrible. And I go like, yes, okay, let's talk about it. Not like, oh, that's so great. And I'm like, is it? I don't, and so and that's what would happen is like you'd be in this meeting with like meant to be senior leaders and not many people, if any, are putting their neck out to go like, no. And so you're like, interesting. Are we getting anywhere? Because everything is kind of taken from the lens of like, will this tarnish my ability to get the next job? Where I don't care about the next job. I care about the outcome. That's it. The outcome is I want to, get X client. I want to get, expand the business in X number of millions. If I look silly along the way, if I say the wrong thing, that's okay. Because like, that's all part of the process to get to the outcome.
I used to work corporate before I started my first business, right? And I always tell people like one of the biggest gifts for me was getting into corporate and then getting made redundant. Because I was like, I never want to be here again. Like I don't want to be, no disrespect to the environment of a great company, but like did you walk away from Domain like with any like key learnings? So you would have met some really interesting people, a lot of great learning opportunities. Like did you walk away with anything because I know you finished up 2 weeks ago. Like, okay, so here's the thing. I learned what it looks like to be in a public company. I learned what it looks like to play the game of influence and the like, political game. I learned some incredible skills from people who worked in the company. So one example was I have a great friend, Angus, who built a business, sold it to Domain, similar kind of pathway. And for example, we're driving one day and he loves business, right? And he always comes up with business ideas, what he does with his friends. And he shows me, he opens up this like slide deck presentation because he's telling me about this idea. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And he goes, oh, let me open it up. And he opens up this folder and there's 100 different slide decks. I'm like, what is that? And he's like, oh, well, every time I come up with an idea, like it's just you're going to forget about it. So you put it and you create a slide deck like you're doing a pitch at a board presentation for 30 minutes and you just plan it out and you just park it. And I was like, fuck, that's powerful. And so like, that's something I've learned. I'm like, that is a super skill. Because you kind of like, even if it's just about like testing theories and never using it, it still, creates like rigor. Yeah.
You know, then I learnt what it looks like from like a high level, negotiation and strategy point of view from the individuals. But I think the biggest learning was more around this won't be the environment that I'll thrive and add value in, more so than this is how I'll do things. Because I kind of got to look at it at the time horizon. I went, okay, cool. Like, and again, it's actually nothing to do with the business. It's more about me. Like, I'm not wired for that, and so therefore, I won't do that.
So good. So good you got exposure. Like kitchen, founder running your own business, then in public company.
Yeah.
Like it's so good for this obviously next move that you're going to play.
Exactly. And then I won't put it up on a pedestal. Like I had the IPO in my mind as on the pedestal because it sounded cool.
Yeah.
But even going through the sale process, you realize like it would take another layer of complexity to do an IPO. And what you realize is when you're in the IPO public world, you're beholden to quarterly outcomes. We always thought long term. You asked before about the salary. Like we were on a salary of 50 grand for the first 7 years. Why? Because we saw in year 10 there will be something huge, and so we will spend accordingly for that. When the times got tough and the market changed, we know the market is going to be different. When you're in the quarterly, it's like, well, the analysts expect us to earn X, so we need to cut to appease them. And I'm like, but that's not the right potential decision over the long term. Now, less so about domain, like they're making great decisions, but it's more so around my brain isn't wired to think quarter by quarter. It's wired at a macro level.
I love that. We were talking before we jumped on about your potty, Chew the Fat, about especially
Shout outs.
No, I really enjoy it. Obviously, Brad Lindenberg was a mate of mine growing up, and I really enjoyed that episode. What have you learned on that process, interviewing these like 40 founders across, I think the US and Australia? Have you seen any common data points that you've noticed around?
Oh, yes.
I'd be keen to understand your observations. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably the interesting one was Brad would be an exception to this rule. What I found out is from this process plus just listening to other content, it's like 9 out of 10 times the people who are successful and ultra successful have some kind of context that's driving them, that's going to see them through the times. So whether that be like some kind of traumatic experience from a younger age, like getting bullied or not feeling like they're worth it, or something that's like innately in them that will make them push, like someone who's had, their father passed away and it was like, I need to be successful because I want to, like do my dad proud. There's something that's so much greater than them. And I think the learning is that having something that's anchoring you will then see when those times get really tough, like if everything's great, and you've got heaps of cash, you're like, what's it worth? Where having something like that, it's just like, I've got no choice. So that's probably one. The next is an interesting one, right? Is like, and I haven't met everybody who's got heaps of cash and things like that, but I've met enough now that I go, it's really interesting from the general population that I know, and you hear passing comments are like, that rich fuck, like the sentiment is like, oh, that person's rich, and like, and it's like, it's always like someone that's richer is like, why can't they give their money away? And then you realize by meeting these people that like, you're just a really good person. Like you're a great person. You haven't had to stab people in the back to get where you are. You're generous with your time. You're a really normal person, and like, you've got a big number. But it's because you worked really hard for that big number. Yeah. And like, so I think it's just more just to realize that like, doesn't matter who, doesn't matter what their name, there's just been so many great people. And the last one was just like that power of network, like, so I never had a network until I literally sold the business and went, oh fuck, I better like start networking because I thought of it as a chore. And then you realize that when you have, when you can have conversations with people and you meet these amazing people, like it's like you become like a dot connector. When you've got someone who's like a billionaire asking, can I meet this athlete? And you're like, oh, wow, like that's so cool. Like, I'd love to do that. That'd be great. And you guys would be a great network. You're like, that's so powerful. Or I had one guy on the podcast. I then kind of helped them with the business. I know another guy who's like elite salesperson for here, help connect him. Boom, now the business uplift is like, there's just power in like, in knowing people, understanding like their needs and being able to go like, how can I help you? And like, I think about that as like, compounding over time through just like being able to help and give people like your time of day.
I wanted to kind of flesh out this network, right? This concept of network, because you said you didn't have much of a network, right? For that time you were building. What happened? Well, like, I guess what did it feel like after you sold, whereby like your name's out there? It's like Frank Greeff. Like people like never probably heard of you. Getting exposure to this guy and his brothers just sold a company for 180 million. Like, how did that feel? Like just people starting to get exposure to who you were, and did that feel weird?
Not really. And I think I'm lucky because I've had the same friends since like high school. And so it was one of my concerns prior to selling. I remember having a D&M with my mate on the balcony. And I was like, I was nervous that like things change and people see me differently. And he's like, as long as you don't change, brother, like we ain't going to change. I'm like, fuck yeah, and so like I didn't, from my immediate circle where it might make me feel weird, where like if people put you on a pedestal and like, wait, like a week ago we're just hanging out, now I'm like this weird, that would make me feel weird. But I think there's been a level of intentionality to get my name out there. And that's because of my new purpose of creating the cookbook. Yeah. So the reason you type in my name in Google and you see all the articles is, well, a lot of it's because it's by design. So I wouldn't feel weird. It's more like, oh, shit, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, there's another, great. Okay, great. There's another article which then serves my mission. What does feel weird is when you find out like someone you don't know talked about someone to talk about, and they're like, oh, I know you. And you're like, in person, that's when it's weird.
Yeah, that is.
You're like, like yesterday I bumped into someone, oh, yeah, Frank. You're like, oh, no, I know you've been following your journey. I'm like, oh, this is weird. So in person, that's where it becomes like slightly strange.
Let's talk about the cookbook. So Eat with Purpose.
Yes.
When's it coming out?
So Eat with Purpose, I'm in the final stages of the design. It goes to print next week, the week after, with a launch late October, early November.
Okay. So what's it all about?
So during the entire time of the business, including the role as the CEO, including the sale, I would go home. I would leave work at 5:36, probably 6. 4 nights out of the week, I cook for my wife and I. And now my wife, my son, and
your wife must love you.
Oh yeah, well, it's like dopamine based line, right? My new favorite. Oh bless Holly, hope you're listening. It's like you get home, it's like, it's a bit underseasoned. Okay. Oh, like I'm like, I'm gonna make this. It's like, oh, can we have that? Oh yeah, you rascal. Anyway, love you. I did that, and people kind of freaked people out. Or I'd have a meeting, and someone would be like, "Oh, should we order Uber Eats?" Have a meeting at my place for business, and they go order Uber Eats. And I was like, "Oh, what do you want?" They're like, "Oh, I don't know this." I'm like, "Oh, I'll cook it." And then I was like, "What's Uber Eats say?" And they said 32 minutes. Like, I'll make it in 14. And they're like, "Wait, what?" Right? And so I think that being like, it's a skill because I take the same approach to business. It's like, what's the minimum I can do to have the maximum flavor output, and then I compress that time, and then I do it, and you can eat healthy. And also create like a third space. So something that's like kind of coming back but lost a lot in the COVID world was work, Uber Eats, phone, TV, all back to work, bed, right? There's never a break. There's something so special for me to go like, I'm working, I get home, I'm standing in the kitchen, I'm eye to eye with my wife and we're chatting about our day. There's no phone because I'm using my hands for chopping, and then we're eating a meal at the table. And then that's, because someone might go, yeah, but that's not time efficient, Frank. I'm like, yeah, it's not. But it's like, it's part of that is like the connection with my wife. And like my son, even though he's jittery, he's sitting at the table, we sit at the table. It's what we do as a family. And so I was like, how do I help other people do this? And so the cookbook is for high performing people who are time poor and health conscious.
Love it.
So everything is between 15 and 30 minutes. All the macros are shown on the cookbook. So it's mostly like predominantly, high protein, medium carbs, good fats, and like focused on that, and focus that you can do it really quick without, like a cookbook, often it's like, here's 1,000 ingredients you don't have. I was like, okay, what's an authentic version of that? And how do I make it that anybody can do it and really simple? So everything has a video to it. So like you scan the QR code and you watch me do the video of the cooking. But it's all in dedication to the children's cancer. And so it's all in dedication to this purpose, hence the Eat with Purpose.
Has anyone executed really well, like delivering this to high performers, like that you've seen?
This is how I do business, Benny. I am fast and loose. So my research was none on this because it was like, okay, cool. For this particular topic, I could go down some competitor research analysis and stuff like that. And I was like, Doesn't matter. Like it's going to be unique because I'm like, okay, who else has been a chef, built a business, and has a cookbook where everything has a video, and then in the cookbook talks about the parallels between a kitchen and a business. I'm like, I know innately that that's going to be unique, and I'm like, I could spend time looking at someone else's, or I could execute. And again, it was all about how do I compress my time. So like me and my boy Kai, shout outs, we did what a team of, I reached out to someone else who'd just done a cookbook at the same time as me. He had a team of 10 to do the photos for the cookbook. So you have a couple of chefs, you've got a food stylist. Me and Kai, we per day would create, I would cook the dish. He'd be filming the video. We'd run the dish downstairs to the garage to take the photos. In it, we created a studio in my garage. We did 10 recipes a day, every day for 6 days. And then we'd deliver the cookbook in 6 days.
Unbelievable.
So like, I could worry about a competitor and go to the bookstore, but like, who cares? Like, let's just go.
I love it.
Yeah.
Has it been a fun process?
Oh, it's so much fun. Like that was part of it too. It was like the creativity of the process. So like my process to create a recipe is, hopefully this doesn't, people are like, what the fuck? I'm not going to buy this book. The creativity was I would sit there at nighttime and I would look at photos of food. And I go, oh, that's interesting. And then I would create the dish, and then the next day I'd buy the ingredients. So I was day by day creating the recipes at night. Then the next day, like buying and executing. So a lot of the videos I'm creating for the first time, don't worry, they're good. But it's so creative. Or even like, because we're a team of 2. So I was the food stylist as well as the chef. So I come down, we're in the garage, and I'm like playing around with peppercorns. I'm like, more peppercorns. Or like tea towels, more tea towels. And like it looks so sick. Like I'm so proud of it. Like so I spent, it's 100% of the revenue goes to children's cancer, but of course there's a great cost to it, to me. And so, but I wanted to everything I do, I want to do something that I'm proud of. So like the cookbook itself, it looks so slick. Like, so I got a design team rival to do the branding. And I spent good cash, like this cash you would spend on creating a new business, because I was like, it has to be something that people are proud of, that people, it's like a token, I have it there because I know that this is doing good, and I want to have this cookbook. So like, I'm super proud of it.
I love that.
It looks sick.
Well done, Frankie. We're going to end on that note. I've really enjoyed jamming with you, man. You got a crazy story, dude. And
Thank you.
I guess you carry so much humility as well. So very
I appreciate
inspired.
it. Thank you, sir.
Cheers.
How good.